Okay, so our topic was about DACA and its repeal by the Trump administration. Okay, so the current state of DACA. Currently, DACA has been repealed by the Trump administration, and this has led to many issues, some of which are social, cultural, and political. And right now, there's a dire need of a better solution because of how many conflicts it has caused between the different parties. For example, just a few months ago, there were conflicts between the Democrats and the Republicans, which contributed to a government shutdown on January 20th last month, 2000. Okay, so now we're going to examine DACA through several lenses. We're going to explain the pros and cons of the current system, and then we're going to present our solution. History of DACA. So DACA was actually influenced by the DREAM Act, which was an act that allowed individuals a path to permanent residency in the United States. However, it was never it was repealed. Okay, creation of DACA. DACA was created in order to give opportunities to the individuals that have been living in the United States for most of their childhood. So, and have not been provided a legal status in the United States. Most Americans think that because these people have been in the United States for most of their childhood and have grown up with American traditions and values, that they should be provided with legal status. In 2014, Obama tried to extend the DACA program to more individuals, more illegal individuals, but many states sued the program. In September 5th, 2017, the Trump administration repealed the DACA policy.
Okay, so since DACA applies to more than 800,000, allows 800,000 immigrants like legal working status in the United States, it's great. It has an overall positive effect on the U.S. economy. And since the repeal of DACA will remove those 800,000 workers, or at least remove their legal working status, that will negatively impact the economy. And so a study by the University of California, performed by Tom K. Wong, found that 54.2% of DACA recipients got their first job after being approved. So this shows that DACA has had an overall positive effect on the employment of unauthorized immigrants. In fact, 70% of the top 25 Fortune 500 companies employ DACA recipients. So this has led to the argument that DACA immigrants are stealing American jobs. However, this may not have very much basis in fact, because Rick Perryman, the CEO and president of the economic research firm Perryman Group, finds that employment, not unemployment, is at its highest it's been in years, and there are still plenty of jobs open, meaning that DACA recipients are simply filling jobs that would otherwise be empty, rather than sort of stealing jobs from Americans. So since DACA recipients have gotten their applications approved, approximately 65% have gotten their first credit card, and 16% have actually bought a home, meaning that they're feeling ready and prepared to contribute to the American economy by making such a decision. And this shows that DACA recipients can contribute to the economy without harming Americans at all, really. And so the Center for American Progress estimates that the repeal of DACA will remove all these effects, these positive effects that I've been talking about, and over $460.3 billion will be lost from the GDP over the next 10 years. On top of this, the repeal of DACA will incur unnecessary costs on the government on social programs such as Social Security and Medicare, which receive funding from DACA recipients through their employers. The Center for American Progress also estimated that $39.3 billion will be lost from this programs. On top of all of this, since the DACA program halts the deportation progress for its recipients, the deportation process will have to be restarted. And the Center for American Progress again estimated that it costs on the order of $10,000 per person to deport. And if we deport like all nearly 800,000 DACA recipients, that's about $7.5 to $8 billion just to deport immigrants who aren't harming the United States.
How does society feel about DACA? Society has an overwhelmingly positive response towards DACA. A 2001 study found that 87% of Americans actually support allowing DACA recipients to stay within the U.S. This is, of course, in stark contrast to what's often presented in the media as a fierce bipartisan battle, in fact, between Democrats and Republicans, with equal support on each side. This of course has been found to not be the case, as we found that the majority of both Democrats and Republicans actually support DACA. This is important to consider when evaluating the judgments the United States will make in the future, especially considering what the United States wants as a whole, not just political parties independently. DACA has had significant impact on dreamers. DACA has had significant impact on society. Dreamers are often from lower class countries such as El Salvador and Ecuador, and are often from lower parts of the socio-economic pyramid. DACA allows for these people to escape vicious cycles of poverty and prejudice that have developed in their home countries by allowing the immigration into the U.S. An example of this is Renita Aldes. Renita Aldes is a lawyer from Ecuador who studied law for 7 years, but was not able to find a job because she was a woman. After coming to the United States, she was given several employment opportunities and was able to create a future for her children and for future generations to come. There's some arguments against DACA. We know that DACA isn't actually perfect. There are some limitations that we have to consider when evaluating the effectiveness of DACA. For one, we have increased crime rates. So a study conducted by the president of the Department of Defense found that 250%, undocumented immigrants were 250% more likely to be convicted of felonies, and this is likely a lower bound, as crimes committed by undocumented immigrants are often towards other undocumented immigrants. Stigma created by the U.S., which has evaluated to DACA immigrants in general being afraid to report to authorities, has caused the majority of crimes to be unreported. And so that means that this 250% figure is likely a lower bound for the amount of crimes that have been committed. DACA was supposed to be temporary. Since its inception, DACA was created as sort of like a botched together law created by President Obama, which used several other laws that had previously been in place from previous immigration reform. This was useful because it allowed President Obama to push DACA and have it be executed efficiently, but later on it created numerous problems and other inefficiencies that we have to solve now. Lawmakers have been pushing for a complete reevaluation and reevaluation of comprehensive immigration reform, which would allow for DACA, for programs like DACA to be much more sustainable and much more efficient in later times.
So taking into all these problems that we've discussed, what can we do about DACA? So our solution is basically a reworking and revitalization of the old DACA program with 3 key changes. First of all, we're going to be taking into account the duration of how long the illegal immigrant has been in the U.S. illegally. So if the illegal immigrant has been in the U.S. For a long time and hasn't committed any crimes, then they're likely not a threat to national security, which leads to the next major change, which is greater penalties for criminal activity. This will make it harder for recipients who have committed crimes to either get their applications renewed or approved in the first place. And lastly, the largest change that we're going to be making is giving recipients a path to citizenship. Because since the entire point of DACA is to allow illegal immigrants who deserve to become American, a path to citizenship would be the highest possible way to give this. However, since it's an argument, it's not perfect, and there are obviously some limitations.
So some limitations are increased increased unemployment, and this is because there's more workers introduced to the workforce, and the second one is the fact that illegals might take spots for fair immigrants, because yeah.
So, let me ask you guys a question. So, bro, give a specific way that your thinking was changed as a result of Mahir's findings.
So Mahir's findings were mainly about conflicts between the parties, over the topic of DACA. And so Mahir talked about how DACA has been really controversial in Congress, and how, for example, he mentioned earlier the government shutdown, and it showed me how impactful a program like DACA can be on other aspects of government.
Okay. What is an example of a compelling argument from one of your team members' reports that you didn't include here?
So we actually didn't include one of my arguments when we were talking. I was talking about how what the two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, wanted, and how that would affect DACA in the future.
Okay. So what was the strongest counter argument to your solution?
I definitely say the strongest counter argument was the fact that illegals take away from the workforce. This is just an intrinsic issue that we weren't able to solve. If you have more people in the workforce, there are going to be less jobs available, and this is just, fact.
Okay.